'Tis a custom with Prospero.
A bird of my tongue is better than a beast of yours.
The evil that men do lives after them.
What dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil.
Blood hath been shed, Dale.
Welcome, everybody. How are you? Tony Estrella here. I'm the artistic director of the Gamm Theater. You probably know that by now if you've been tuning in. This is episode, I don't even know what number, in our second season of Brush Up Your Shakespeare. Welcome back. We want to, as always, thank Navigant Credit Union for their sponsorship of this series, which is going to continue on as we move forward and kind of continue to navigate the new pandemic rules. We hope you're enjoying this. And just a little bit of a reminder why we do this. And what we hope to accomplish here. And we're going to kind of advance the ball down the road a little bit today with the text we're going to be talking about. But as you know, Shakespeare is a big deal for us, right? This is something that we work on here at the Gamm, and it's been very integral to our mission, our reputation, and the kind of the DNA of the organization. And it's been very, successful. It's something I devoted my life to, etc. But one of the things that's always difficult, and sometimes audiences get a little scared about Shakespeare, right? Because somehow we come back and forth and we say, well, I'm not going to understand that, and that's Shakespeare, that's Old English, right? All of those kinds of things. So what we're doing here and what we've been doing in these episodes is talking about his language, breaking it down, and trying to prove the case that I will, fight for the rest of my life, that it is not Old English, it is modern English, it is our language, it is understandable. And if we actors are doing our job, then you should be fine. As the formulation I always go back to is, if you don't understand, 70% of the reason is our fault, at least, right? 30% might be yours. So we're trying to bridge that gap. That 70% is on us. How can we as actors get better? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, as well as what can we do for you and what can you do to kind of lean forward, lose your fear, and open up your ears and hearts and minds to this beautiful language and kind of claim it as yours, and never have to worry about going to a Shakespeare play again and saying, I'm not going to understand it. And our guest today will help us do that. I am so happy to bring to you someone who, for all of you Gamm supporters, patrons, and fans out there, will recognize immediately from many, many productions on our stage. So let's just bring her in without any further ado, and then we'll talk about all the things she's done. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Marianna Basham.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Gamm friends.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, as those of you who, have seen Marianna on our stage number of times, and I can go down the list and the incredible role she's played for us, and memorable, chief amongst which Blanche, of course, in Streetcar Named Desire. I don't even know what the most recent was because time has collapsed. So it's been, you know what I mean? So was it Uncle Vanya, I think?
Yeah, that was Vanya.
That was Vanya, right? Yelena and Uncle Vanya. Of course, Mary Stuart in King Elizabeth, which was our adaptation of Mary Stuart by Schiller, which was just an incredible performance. Way back, the first one was Real Thing by Tom Stoppard, and of course, Hedda Gabler, as well as Hedda, which was an amazing performance. There you are, all guns blazing. Incredible. And, of course, it's just the bittersweetness of all of this, because of what we're going through in the pandemic, is we should be preparing right now for Mary Jane, right? Which we were going to have, which was going to come in the spring. There you are. Now, I want to point out that we shot that poster probably 7 years ago now or something. It's what it feels like, well before there was any inkling of a pandemic, but there's our teddy bear doing what we've all been doing for the past 10 or 11 months or so, which is protecting ourselves with our masks. And it's a terrific play, Mary Jane. And we sincerely hope that you have not seen the last of it, because you're going to want to see Marianna in the role as Mary Jane. It's a terrific play. So, but I can't give anything away yet. We're busy planning what's going to come and still navigating all of the unknowns. But, I really hope that I will be amongst you all in the front row watching that on opening night sometime in the near future. Of course, Marianna has, I don't think there's a professional theater in the Boston area that she hasn't worked at. So that would go down the list of these: the Huntington, SpeakEasy, Lyric Stage, of course, Commonwealth Shakespeare, which we'll get to. Just about every theater, new rep, of course, every theater in Boston, and to, of course, another theater we'll talk about a bit. She is a company member at Actors Shakespeare Project in Boston as well. So much. This is only kind of the tip of the iceberg. You may have, if you don't recognize Marianna from the pictures, and you're totally new to this, you may recognize her face from some television and movie stuff, particularly Moonrise Kingdom, the great Wes Anderson's film, which if you haven't seen it, go and see it. It's a great movie. Actually shot in Rhode Island here, down here, and Marianna is a prominent member of an all-star cast, which she also is right now. Now, if you're looking at Marianna's screen, you see some hotel art behind her there because she is quarantining in a hotel. Tell us where you are and why you're there.
So where am I? I'm in Quincy, and I'm quarantining in advance of my second day of shooting on Don't Look Up, which is the new Adam McKay movie, which will be, I think, on Netflix in the fall. Mm-hmm. And that there's the all-star cast of that is like, we got Meryl Streep and Kate Blanchett and Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Rylance and Jonah Hill and Jennifer Lawrence and Ron Perlman and other people. It's incredible. So working on that.
And the Gamm's own Richard Donnelly as well. Just saying.
And when you a lot of Boston, a lot of local people that you'll recognize when you're watching that movie in the fall. You'll be like, I know this person, I know this person, I know this person, I know this person. It's gonna be fun.
That's great. Yeah, it looks fantastic. And good luck with your shooting. When's shooting? Next week?
Yeah, Friday. But
next Friday.
Yeah, so they have us in a hotel for like a week before. My 2 shoot days happen to be a month apart. So. Quarantine for a week, get a bunch of COVID tests, get a COVID test on the day of, sit in your car, go in, shoot your scene, leave.
Yeah, it's a crazy world out there for actors. And I think, the only small silver lining in all of this, right, is that like a day or 2 day job could become a 10 or 15 day job. And that, of course, helps pay the bills. So that's a good thing too. So, well, good luck with the shoot and welcome. So obviously, Marianna, your work is so wide and varied and ironically enough, or coincidentally enough, with what we're doing here, you've never done Shakespeare with us. No. Everything else under the sun, it seems. And certainly King Elizabeth kind of, is in that world a bit, but it's not quite there. And but you've done a lot of this, and particularly with, as we talked about earlier, our friends up at the Commonwealth Shakespeare Company. You've been in a couple of productions up there. 12th Night, which we're going to talk about today, right? And Othello.
Yeah, and Fred Sullivan was in both of those. So at least
both of those as well.
That is my only connective tissue. Yeah, there we are.
There you are, as Malvolio and Viola, which we're going to get to in a second. We're actually going to talk about right around that scene, I believe, because he's got the ring there on the end of the cane, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute. And also, of course, your work with Actors Shakespeare Project, which is obviously devoted to his work and has been for, how long has Actors ASP been around for?
Oh, geez. I'm going to say 2005, 6. Yeah. My first show with them was in 2006, but they'd been around for maybe a year or two before that. Mm-hmm. And I became a company member, and I think in 2010.
And, what is the, so can you talk a little bit about, Shakespeare as what, working on his plays has kind of where it fits into your work as an actor and why it's important to you, and why join a company that's devoted to him, and what do you get from that? What is what does it mean to kind of devote yourself, at least in part, to his work?
I guess I feel like these texts are still around for a reason, and it's because they're like, these plays are like, they're like treasure chests, and then Shakespeare's given you like the treasure map to succeed with the work. Like it's just like, I used to be super intimidated by Shakespeare, and I hadn't done a whole lot of it, and then I started to work with Actors Shakespeare Project and did a couple, and I was like, oh, like everything you need is here. Shakespeare is giving you so many clues and hints that all the acting stuff you could justify just by looking at how he's laid out the text and the choices he's making around that. And that's amazing. So yeah, and I mean, with the Actor Shakespeare Project, I've done a lot of Shakespeare, but we also do other stuff too. And I've done a lot of interesting shows that were, you know, language based, you know, where there's a lot of poetry to the language. Something like God's Ear by Jenny Schwartz, just as an example, is something where the text is crazy and beautiful, and it's its own poetry, and it's got its own rhythm and verse to it in a way. And so, you know, it just stretches different muscles. But there's such humanity in these characters that and complexity that it never feels boring. It feels very now to me and very human.
Yeah, and as you say, you know, I mean, it becomes. We talked about this with John last week as well, a couple of weeks ago, about how a kind of study of his work and using his work as a model is, helps you with everything, right? Whether it's a very obviously language-based piece like God's Ear, or anything else, because our art form is, we go back to, we say audiences come to the theater, right? Audience, right? Which is mean we know that they're meant to hear, right? This is the first sense that kind of, somehow our souls are, the door to our souls are our ears rather than the eyes, which is of course a film, right? That which is a visual medium, but that theater is an oral, AURAL one, right? And an oral one, ORAL, and that kind of communication. And Shakespeare, as you say, everything's there in the language, right? So he allows us to kind of, if we're kind of doing our analysis and we kind of listen to him, and he directs like no other writer in the world, right? I mean, he really, right? I mean, he tells us everything we need to know. It almost makes the director superfluous a little bit in the room, other than throw up composition and make sure the audience can see who's talking, you
take like John Cariani's Almost Maine, which he tells you exactly how to emphasize every word and what everybody's thinking and all these stage directions, and you're like, leave me alone. But Shakespeare's doing that in his own way,
right.
in a subtler way.
In a subtle, right? He makes you dig for it and kind of understand. And he's kind of without underlining things, right? Famously, no stage directions, right? Almost none, except for occasionally, as we said, they fight or exit pursued by bear once in a while, right? I mean, but it's like really not much other than that, So speaking of that, and we pulled up a picture of you in this before. We're going to talk about Viola and Twelfth Night today, and this is one of my favorite plays, one that I have a bunch of experience with, directed it a couple of times and have been in it as well. And Twelfth Night, of course, which I think is Shakespeare's greatest comedy, at least in my humble opinion. And maybe we'll talk about why. And at its heart, it's a great ensemble. I think it's one of his best ensemble pieces, right? And the fact that there's about 10 great roles in it, where you really need a great group of people. But at its heart and soul is Viola, of course, is the beating heart of the play. And I think maybe among my, the top 5 of my favorite characters in all of Shakespeare, and why, and I've seen you play this role and how many times have you played it?
Twice. So did you, I know you saw the Commonwealth Shakespeare.
I saw the Commonwealth. I didn't see Shakespeare. Yeah. Okay. I didn't see Actor Shakespeare, no, but I did see you. And when I think of this, if I were, we were doing this and you're like, why Viola and why you in this part, I can see directors aren't, Steve was no dummy in casting you in this. And because for me, and we'll talk about this, she's one of those characters that requires a kind of an acute, almost, tuning fork like sensitivity to the world. She's such a, and I don't mean she's not fragile at all, because she's also, I think, probably one of the bravest and strongest characters he's ever written. But she kind of acts despite her fear and despite the danger and while remaining open, right, to all that's around her. And just a little capsule thing for everybody. If you don't know Twelfth Night, go out and read it because it's amazing, or search out a production online that you can watch. Can you give us a little capsule of at least
You're
Viola?
going to ask me to do this. Oh yeah, there's an Actor Shakespeare Project version.
There it is. Yeah, there you are. Right.
Storytelling. Oh my gosh. Okay, so what happens? Viola and her brother Sebastian are shipwrecked. They get separated. She's wandering around on this island. Where is she?
Illyria, right? Illyria.
And it's not safe to be a woman in a place like this. And so somebody helps her get some guy clothes, and then she finds herself in the position of being like a boy servant to a lord, and she falls in love with him. He doesn't obviously know that.
Okay, good. We can stop there because that's all we need to know. We don't want to spoil it for everybody. That's all we need to know going into what we're going to do. But yes, right. So it's a great play for today because it's about, like so many of his comedies, especially, right? I think of Tempest when I think of this, it's about, a restoration, right? Someone is shipwrecked. It's a refugee story of a sense, and thrust into danger, and who is in great grief because she believes that what? Her brother is dead, right? And so this is right we know this right from the top. She gets washed ashore. She doesn't know where her brother is. She assumes that he's gone and perished in the shipwreck. We later, spoiler alert, learn that he isn't. And of course, they're twins, identical twins. So that gets really fun, of course, as the story goes on and gets complicated. But in this, she is sent right here. She gets the job as Duke Orsino. Remember, this play, for those of you who don't know, it begins very famously with, do you know the first line? Can you remember? It wasn't your line. If music be the food of love, play on. I keep putting you on the spot. I'm so sorry. I won't do that anymore. But it has a famous line, and that's the Duke's line. And he's very melancholy, and the Duke is kind of in love with being in love. He's like Romeo at the top of Romeo and Juliet, right? And he loves, who does he love at this?
He loves Olivia.
Olivia, right? So he's been making all sorts of he sends his guys out there, right? He's got all of these older dudes, right, who he sends, and he goes, go to her and tell her how much I love her and bring her chocolate and bring her flowers and tell her she needs to marry me. And each one of them gets rebuffed because Olivia has also lost a brother and is in deep mourning, right? And so usually at the top of this play is veiled, right? In the scene is in black. And she is not willing to thaw out because the pain is too near. So we have two women who come together, one who appears not to be a woman, who are both grieving for lost brothers very recently, right? In this scene that we're about to talk about, because the Duke gets the idea, says, I'm going to send this young guy who maybe is a little bit more fresh faced. He'll have a better chance than some of these old guys. And so he sends you along to go knock on her door with a box of chocolates and some flowers and a poem, right? You come ready to kind of to bring his love, to state his love to this guy, right? I think that's what we need to know for this scene, yeah? And this scene is wonderful. It's the first scene that Olivia and Viola meet. It's right in the first act of the play, so we're not giving too much away. We see, grief encounter grief. And then we see the beginning by the end of a thaw. And Shakespeare does something incredibly marvelous in this scene, where this scene starts off in prose. And one of the things we haven't, we talked some about in this is the levels of Shakespeare's language. And he of course writes mostly in verse, as we've talked about, iambic pentameter, blank verse, that the dot, the dot, the dot, the dot, the dot kind of rhythm, the heartbeat rhythm in 5 feet, right? And then, but about 30% of his work is in prose, which is kind of not rhythmless, but a definitely varied rhythm narrative, kind of like what we're speaking now, but of course, much, much better. And then even within the verse, we've got a couple of different registers, at least 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 10, right? That go from naturalistic verse, where you don't, that's not necessarily poetic, but fits within the meter and has a buoyancy based on that. And then heightened verse, where the registers shift and an actor is all of a sudden speaking more poetically, using metaphor, etc., rich imagery, alliteration, those kinds of things, right? And in this scene, there's even a third kind of verse, which is bombastic, overwrought, and really bad. And it's deliberate on Shakespeare's part, right? And so we're going to look at each of these in here and see, and in a piece of this scene, and see what, and you know what, Marianna, we'll bring it up, and then I'll read Olivia's couple of lines. You can read Viola, and we'll go through the end of that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it a little bit. And some of you will recognize this. Can you see that on there?
I'm good.
All right. So we're going to read this scene and then break the language down a little bit and talk about those different registers that I was just pointing out. Go ahead.
Okay. My lord and master loves you. Oh, such love could be but recompense, though you were crowned the nonpareil of beauty.
How does he love me?
With adorations, fertile tears, with groans that thunder love, with sighs of fire.
Your lord does know my mind. I cannot love him. He might have took his answer long ago.
If I did love you in my master's flame with such a suffering, such a deadly life, in your denial, I would find no sense. I would not understand it.
Why? What would you?
Make me a willow cabin at your gate and call upon my soul within the house. Write loyal cantons of contemned love and sing them loud, even in the dead of night. Hallo your name to the reverberate hills and make the babbling gossip of the air cry out, Olivia! Oh, you should not rest between the elements of air and earth, but you should pity me.
You might do much. Great. Thank you. That was wonderful. And of course, instinctively, you caught on to those different registers. Now, in this scene that we put up, we don't go back that far in the scene. This is towards the end. There's no prose in this section of the scene. It's kind of those different levels of verse we were talking about, meaning the iambic pentameter. So the prose is a little bit earlier, just in a couple of speeches before, where we see all of these registers happen. And I loved how you took us through that, Marianna, because it went from the naturalistic verse of, and again, what you played beautifully, and this is something that the audience, maybe I should have underlined before we started, is right now it says Viola on the page, but you are Cesario, right? So you're disguised. So you're dressed like a young man, and you are disguised as Cesario. So Olivia thinks she's talking to this young man named Cesario, and it's Viola. And those levels of speech also correspond to the kind of characters you're playing, right? Mm-hmm. We know when it's Viola speaking and when it's Cesario speaking, right? And when Cesario is speaking, it's very clear. There's one section in there, and you did it really, really lovely because it's so bad. Olivia asks about the Duke, how does he love me? Like, give it your best shot. And then you go into the prepared speech, right?
Right.
What is that you say?
With adorations, fertile tears, with groans that, I should say fertile. With adorations, fertile tears, with groans that thunder love with sighs of fire. Now, our antenna should be going off because that's crap, right? I mean, it's really fun crap, but it's crap. And how do we know it's crap? Yeah, because we're about to get something it's compared to that is clearly not crap. And most obviously, the Willow Cabin speech was a very famous speech and very difficult, tricky speech because it's the balance, and you did it wonderfully, the balance of incredible richness of language and image, but delivered in a way that is a simple, direct call from the heart, and I thought that was really wonderfully done. And a couple of things that you might have heard me make a sound because it just moved me, the way that the word soul came out of you and all of that. All of a sudden we can feel that language get richer. So I want to kind of pull up a couple examples of that. John, if you could bring that back up on the screen and leave Marianna up, please. Yes. Thank you. We get that. We can see that line there, with groans that thunder love, with sighs of fire. And I love here that if we look at the verse on this, right, we have the nonpareil of beauty, how does he love me, as a verse line. And Viola has a short verse line here. If we do this out, right, with adorations, fertile tears is at least a foot short there. So does that indicate a pause? And I wonder, does she pause or he pause before then to try to figure out, what do I do? And you can see a bit of stage business where maybe you go to find the script that you brought with you, Yeah. And then we get this very presentational, crap, adorations, fertile tears. I love that you chose to make the I long there too, because it's just even bad. It's like a Hallmark card, right? It's like, instead of writing the thing, and then groans. How does a groan exactly thunder love? You know what I mean? It's like, what a crazy image. It's wonderfully funny, but it's really absurd. And then a sigh of fire, right? That's a crazy paradox. Yeah. And we're going to get to sighs in a minute that are much different, later on, both in Willow Cabin and in the Ring speech. Yeah. So we automatically get this overblown language, right? That you're doing wonderfully in kind of punching up. Yeah. And then Olivia comes back with this really direct, almost direct as a heart attack, naturalistic line. Your Lord does know my mind. I cannot love him. Incredibly regular, a really nice piece of verse, but absolutely naturalistic. No word that we have no idea, not an image. It's as direct as it can be. And then the second line does as well. He might have took his answer long ago. This conversation is over, which prompts Cesario to go away
and Viola to say, could you read the next 4 lines?
If I did love you in my master's flame, such a suffering, such a deadly life. In your denial, I would find no sense. I would not understand it.
Great. And then so all of a sudden we hear something very different than thunder's love and sighs of fire, right? We get a direct line back, but we start to hear rhythm come in and we get imagery, right? You know, Olivia is very direct and shut off. And you say master's flame in that first
little flicker, little just like,
flicker, right?
Little poetry.
Such a suffering with those S's in a row, such, the repeat of such, a deadly life. And this is going to come back, this dead, we want to pay attention to that. Such a suffering, such a deadly life, right? So master's flame, suffering, deadly life. In your denial, again, very naturalistic, I would find no sense. That line is so balanced perfectly. And the clarity of why, right? The I would not understand it. And that's enough of a pinch for Olivia to say, ouch, which is, I want to know more. Right? What would you do, kiddo? Yeah. And then bang, this next bit comes out. So let's take a run at that. And I'll give you that, Olivia, your Lord does know my mind. We can go through this kind of, I love how she escalates enough, as you say, that little flicker that gets Olivia to go with the question. And then she's unleashed with Willow Cabin. Yeah. You want to try this? We'll try that one more time and see if we can mark those going through.
From where?
From your Lord does know my mind.
Okay.
Your Lord does know my mind. I cannot love him. He might have took his answer long ago.
If I did love you in my master's flame, such a suffering, such a deadly life. In your denial, I would find no sense. I would not understand it.
Why? What would you?
Make me a willow cabin at your gate and call upon my soul within the house. Write loyal cantons of contemned love and sing them loud, even in the dead of night. Halloo your name to the reverberate hills and make the babbling gossip of the air cry out, Olivia! Oh, you would not rest between the elements of air and earth, but you should pity me.
You might do much. And she's hooked, right? So right there, this is an extraordinary speech. I told you why this is so tricky, because it's almost harder on Olivia in a sense than Viola here. Olivia falls head over heels in love, right? In that breath that, but you should pity me, you might do much, usually comes out of her as if she didn't mean to say it, right? Because she's looking at this young man who's not of her class, etc., which she's about to ask, her about his class, but and says, "You are the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life." Right? Is like she's suddenly. And I love that you used that word earlier about master's flame. The flicker of master's flame is the beginning of the thaw of Olivia. It's almost like we watch an ice sculpture. It's like the end of the end of Winter's Tale when Hermione come to life, right? We watch over the course of this scene, Olivia go from this sculpture, this you say it later. Viola says it in Act 2, Scene 4 with Orsino. She says grief, like patience on a monument, right? And so Olivia is like patience on a monument, and we see her come alive. And by the end of the scene, once you go, she's on fire, right? She talks about having the plague and she can't believe she wants to get that black dress off and put on a nice, kind of, I don't know, some spring clothes or something. It's gorgeous. Wonderful, and just instinctually what you did with this, with that I hope everybody listening out there heard in that second line, and call upon my soul, which you kind of made, and I always say this to my students, it's such a good thing for audiences to listen for and for actors to take hold of, and you did it so beautifully, which is, turn a quarter note into like a really long, like the longest whole note, hold it for 6 measures, right? You did the same thing with Olivia, because that's what the thing is calling for, And there's 2 things in there that I love that when he puts these words against each other, willow cabin and babbling gossip, right? Those 2 kind of juxtaposition those words, right? Because they're interesting. Those words have never been put together before, right? And I'm always thinking of like, what is that willow? When you hear this is famous. This is called often the willow cabin speech. What is a willow cabin to you?
To me,
Yeah.
It's like a makeshift little hovel. It's like, I'm just gonna camp out like in this not great shelter, and it's sad.
Right, right. What do we call a willow tree? Is often referred to as a weeping willow, right? And they, because of the way the kind of leaves, the fronds hang, right? So you wouldn't want to shelter under a willow in a storm, which is that, so that's vulnerability. Is she's saying, I'm going to remain vulnerable. My only thing is going to be the least, because I want you to be able to hear and see and know that I'm there. And then it builds through the cantons of contemned, which was beautifully, just the kind of the rhythm of that phrase of contemned love. And it doesn't matter that it's condemned, meaning it's never going to happen. I'm going to still sing it, right? And then you get this incredible onomatopoetic language, which we talk about a lot, which an actor always has to listen for, because it's going to help the audience lift there, right? Reverberate hills, and then this amazing babbling gossip. And those B's and that P at the end, right? How do you make the gossip babble, that the air is actually gossiping, right? That it's carrying these messages forth, and it's kind of continuing. It's as a babble. It's like you can almost hear the music of the spheres becomes this contemned love, right? Gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. And then, of course, culminates in what you did so beautifully, which is that kind of heartfelt plea of Olivia. And of course, Olivia, and you did it great because you made it echo, right? And it says that in the line. Yeah. Yeah. What's the line there? What's that word? Hello.
Oh.
Yeah. And the O.
And what I got to say too, what was fun about doing it on the Common is that the way the sound system is set up out there in outdoor Shakespeare is that there's mics, or there's what am I trying to say? Speakers everywhere. Yeah. So like you really could hear that go like da 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 da. Yeah. Cool.
It's so wonderful out there, the majestic. And of course, he's writing this for an outdoor space, right? And to kind of let that kind of fly. And you're under trees. People are under trees out there. You can, and you're right, you can hear it bounce off the building sometimes, right? When you're up there and you hit just the right timbre or note, and all of a sudden it echoes back off Lowe's majestic theater over there, or whatever it is, the movie theater, right? It comes bouncing back onto that's so great.
And it just feels really good, right? Like there's been all this like building pressure and like not being able to say anything, and people treating her like crap, and then there's a little catharsis maybe in that Olivia and the O. There's a little release there, but it's so powerful that like it's almost magical and undeniable for Olivia. Like, whoa, someone just said my name, like with this, like Sky wrote my name with a plane, and it feels good.
And she's not, and you having played this a couple of times, how much do you think Viola registers that in Olivia? That she just has an effect on her?
I think not right now.
Right. Because she reveals it on later, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of discoveries and they're not happening right now. Yeah. She's in her own little place.
She just has to make sure she doesn't get caught, right? That's right. The case. All of a sudden she just said, I'm Viola again, right? And then it's like, I got to watch that, right? It's
my parents is right now. She's like, oh yeah, well, I'm a guy. Yeah. Everything's cool. I'm cool. Everything's
good again. Yeah. So that's beautiful. So as we can see in that, right, with Shakespeare, he's telling us within the way he's building the language, and if the actor's listening for it, and if the actor listens for it and has an appetite to kind of embrace it, as Marianna's doing here, then the audience's ear just opens up for it. And it's absolutely understandable. And we hear it, and we feel like we're in safe hands. And that communication between each is so, necessary and precious to any kind of theatrical give and take, but particularly in Shakespeare, so that we feel we're not being left behind, that we're on the same, that we can be with you. And because we're about to open up, what we're going to jump to next here in a second is that most intimate of relationships between an actor and her audience, right? Which is the soliloquy, right? Which is the direct, I'm only talking now, my partner on stage. We talked a lot about this in other episodes. The most famous soliloquies, of course, Hamlet has a lot of them. Iago has a lot of them. The kind of big characters usually get points on stage where they come out and there's no other actor on stage. It's the character and the audience, and they look out to us and they say, I got a problem. Right. And usually they're looking for our help in figuring it out. Right. As kind of like, so soliloquies are very powerful. So we jump right from this scene very quickly thereafter. you hit the road, right? She says, you can come back. Don't send any of those other guys. I don't want anything to do with the Duke unless you bring his instructions, because clearly, so we in the audience are in a different place than Viola is. We watch, we see Viola come out, we see Olivia, we see all that. We watch Olivia fall in love with her. We watch Viola go, uh-oh, I'm Cesario again, and get off stage as fast as she can. And then we see Olivia by herself, and Olivia tells us, I have just caught the plague, meaning I am now in love with, this kid just knocked me right out. And oh my goodness gracious, what am I going to do? So what she does is she has a ring on, right? Maybe it's her brother's ring. And she takes it off and she says to her servant, Malvolio, who is, as you can tell by the name, Malvolio, is a little bit of is not the nicest guy in the world. And he's pretty protective of Olivia. We're about to find out pretty quickly that he is actually head over heels in love with her. And so she calls him and says, chase down that kid that was just here, that punk, because Malvolio's already said he doesn't like him, and give him this ring back that he left. It's not mine. I don't want it. Tell him to bring it back to the Duke. Yeah. And so Malvolio says, yes, ma'am, goes out and goes chasing after Viola, who hasn't gotten very far, as Cesario running back to the Duke's house, and then comes, and as we saw in that picture, John, can you bring that picture back up of Fred and Marianna? Yeah, there you go. There's Fred Sullivan as Malvolio, and he comes back, stops you, waylays you on your way, and says, take the ring back, you jerk. And you say, what are you talking about? You kind of don't know what to do, because he's mean and big and, and he's going to hurt you. So you are left alone with this conundrum of what is this ring thing about? And we get one of the most famous of soliloquies in all of Shakespeare, which is this is referred to. That was the Willow Cabin speech. This is the ring speech. And those of us who direct Shakespeare plays and do lots of auditions with people doing Shakespeare, you get to see the ring speech a lot, right? Because it's such a great monologue. And hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about why. So there it is up on the screen. Marianna, you want to take us through this? Let's just take a crack at it, and then we're going to break it down a little bit, and just so we can get an idea of what's going on. So Malvolio has just left the ring with Viola.
Okay. I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. She made good view of me. Indeed, so much that methought her eyes had lost her tongue, for she did speak in starts distractedly. She loves me, sure. The cunning of her passion invites me in this churlish messenger. None of my lord's ring, why he sent her none. I am the man. If it be so as 'tis, poor lady, she were better love a dream. Disguise. Oh, I see thou art a wickedness wherein the pregnant enemy does much. How easy it is for the proper false in women's waxen hearts to set their forms. Alas, our frailty is the cause, not we. For such as we are made of, such we be. How will this fadge? My master loves her dearly, and I, poor monster, fawn as much on him, and she, mistaken, seems to dote on me. What will become of this? As I am man, my state is desperate for my master's love. As I am woman, now alas the day, what thriftless sighs shall poor Olivia breathe? Oh, time. Thou must untangle this, not I. It is too hard a knot for me to untie.
It's great. Yeah, it's funny. It's like you ask the audience, nobody offers you anything back, and then you all kind of look up and go, well, this is going to have to work itself out because I have no idea what to do next. I just such a vulnerable and wonderful kind of admission of like, not defeat, because the best thing is that she just goes on and says, she doesn't say I'm giving up. She just says, I don't know what's going to come next, and I'm just going to have to be ready to go after it or to deal with it, to fight it, right? Who knows?
Possible thing to do. That's
And
a
then
hard thing to do for a human being.
impossible. I mean, how does none of us want to do that, you know? And then and the overall this is such an important speech in this play because it lays out the plot for the rest of the play, right? It just says, okay, now we've got like that Jay Giles song, I love her and she loves him and he loves somebody else, you just can't win, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? We get the classic Chekhov setup where everybody's a daisy chain of someone chasing other people that don't love them but actually love somebody else, right? So she sets the problem up. But the wonderful thing about this is the number of revelations in the speech, right? And the slow burn of trying to figure out exactly what is happening and why, and how ultimately she is at fault for it by virtue of deceit, right? A deceit that has been set up in order to protect her, right? So this conflict that Viola's feeling is she's kind of laying it all out for us so that once we leave this, now we're back on the same page. Remember, we talked about, we know something Viola doesn't know when she starts the speech in the audience, right? We know that Olivia is now in love with her. We know why she sent Malvolio with the ring. So we get the kind of thrill of being a little bit ahead of our protagonist, and we get to watch her come to terms with it. And the gasps, the revelation, the sighs in this, which she remarks on constantly. And that incredible, we'll talk about in a second, invented word fadge, which made me laugh out loud when you said it, is one of those unique kind of Shakespearean things where if you looked at it on the page, you go, what does that mean? And then an actor kind of takes hold of it and you go, I don't need any dictionary to tell me what that means. She just told me what that meant. And isn't that the perfect word? You know, Shakespeare loved, when in doubt, make up something new, which he would do all the time. Now, I'm not quite sure if fadge was new. Maybe it was in use that I don't know, but I have never heard it anywhere else and anything else other than this, you know? So what do we learn? What would you say in this, to catch us all up, is the plot of this speech? What does Viola learn?
Okay, that the ring actually is is a secret code or token from Olivia that is like, I love you. Mm-hmm. And so then she's like, oh, okay, wait a minute. I have to go back and think like, well, now that I think about it, she was looking at me kind of crazy at the end of that. And then I could tell I know what that look means. And she was talking funny. And it's not from my lord. It's not from my lord. This is from her to me. And then the fact that I'm disguised now has caused Olivia to make this mistake. And I'm embarrassed for her, and but I'm also in trouble, and that I'm sort of I've painted myself into a corner, or I am painted into a corner now. Yeah. What
am I gonna do?
Yeah. So I'm stuck in a love triangle, and I can't tell anybody anything.
And you do admit, which I don't know we've seen quite as boldly yet, that you love the Duke.
Yes, but I mean, I can't tell him.
No, you're right. But you admit to us, right, that we get that piece of information very clearly, like as my master, as I fawned on him, right? So that's a big moment for us too. We're like, I mean, we may have intuited it already and we watch how you respond to him, etc. But we haven't had much time with you two yet, right?
Yeah, doesn't it? I can't remember. There's like, he leaves the room and I say something like, "Oh my God," I don't know. I can't remember what it is, but there's a little obviousness to it. But maybe I'm making that up. I can't remember.
But the admission of it in terms of now how it complicates this relationship. And I've always loved, and one of the things that, we started talking about this of why do I love Viola so much as a character, and Shakespeare's creation of her, is that when given a choice between her own self-interest and the pain of someone else, her own pain and someone else's, she chooses to heal the other person constantly. Yeah. It's amazing, and that's what this speech does. Something it's very funny, of course, and you were great. I mean, and it's got a bunch of jokes in it that make us laugh at the absurdity of it. Fadge is a funny word, but it has this section in it as well, and we'll break this down in a minute, that tries to anatomize sensitivity, right, to others' pain, right, about why do we fall for these things, and what is it about what we do to each other that can easily, the thing about how waxen our hearts are, and how because rather than being a weakness or a failability, she uses the word frailty, which echoes Hamlet's frailty, thy name is woman, right? But it actually is it also not something that is defines her as in the kind of the supreme kind of, I don't know, passion of her goodness is something amazing, right? Which is, there's a selflessness to that frailty as well, which it wants to believe. It wants to kind of, take people at what they say. It wants to kind of be open to another person's pain. And so therefore is malleable, right? Versus that's that tuning fork thing I was talking about earlier. She's so sensitive, right? To the smallest piece of what somebody else is feeling. And clearly,
so it leaves a mark, right? It leaves it left a mark. And that's, that's who we are. That's who women are. That's who I am. And just like owning it in an interesting way without self-punishment. I think in the past there's been a lot of self-punishment in that, and like it's interesting, and it just now to be like, maybe I'll just own that in a more positive way. I have empathy.
Yeah. What's wrong with that? Yeah, we want to see it as, it's not frailty, actually. We call it these words sometimes, and we see it as weakness, but it's actually Viola's superpower. It's what causes, in my opinion, it was what causes Olivia to fall in love with her, right? Is someone who recognizes me at a very fundamental level that other people haven't been able to. It just so happens that, in this, there's a disguise that is ultimately allowing Olivia to also express her sexual desire, her romantic desire, because it seems to be in the form of something that but this play also, what this play does so beautifully, this play is about, I think it's actually Shakespeare's greatest play about love. And even more so than the obvious contenders, Romeo and Juliet and others, because it navigates love as a kind of neutral force, in a sense, that exists beyond sexual desire, beyond sexuality and gender, etc. And it looks at it in its purest form as it caroms off all of these individual people. The relationship between you and Olivia, the relationship between you and the Duke in 2-4, which you're both in the guise of men at that point, and there's an incredible kind of deep desire and love expressed there. Then Sebastian and Antonio, etc. And then how all of those things morph together, and none is given value over another, right? Mm-hmm. None is given primacy. Yes, in the end, it's a Shakespearean comedy. The couples pair off and get married in the proper way, et cetera, or about to off stage. But Shakespeare's, of course, getting at something much deeper than that. Now, one thing I thought we would take a look at, in which we haven't talked about yet in any of these episodes, is what makes verse, and how do actors look at a piece of verse, and why the line breaks, right? Shakespeare writes in 10-syllable lines. So, John, do you want to bring that up so we can see that one more time, that the speech? In whole. So if we look at this on the page, we see, for instance, the first couple of lines, I left no ring with her. What means this lady? End stop. And what we mean by end stop there's a punctuation at the end of that line, right? So we get a question mark. So we know that's a full line. We take a breath and we go on to the next thought, right? At the end of the next one, fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. We get an exclamation point. We see that that's also end stop, meaning the thought finishes. We take a breath and we go on to the next one, and something different happens. She made good view of me. Indeed, so much that methought her eyes had lost her tongue. Now that line, the third line, does not end on much, right? The thought continues through that methought her eyes had lost her tongue. Now an actor has a choice here, right? Do I run that together to get that thought, or do I honor the line break, right? And let the phrase exist on its own, and then put the micro beat in there, and what pinches that next line? Right. So this is kind of, we constantly, we this is inside baseball a little bit. Actors, we talk about these things in rehearsals and class, and we make choices based on these things. Can we try the first 4 lines of this? I'm sorry. Yeah, let's, the first 5 lines actually, because to the period of distractedly, and try it once. When you get to that, run that together. Don't do a line break. Don't honor the line break, and see what happens. And then we'll try it the opposite way.
Yeah. So, I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. She made good view of me. Indeed, so much that methought her eyes had lost her tongue, for she did speak and starts distractedly.
Good. All right, great. So we heard that, and in that time we ran the thought together. So we got indeed so much that methought her eyes had lost her tongue. And even then you kind of ran through the next one, even though there's a comma there. It's connecting the note because it makes sense to, right? For she did speak and starts distractedly. We know as actors, we haven't completed the thought yet. We're chugging forward. And that makes perfect sense. Well spoken. I get it. What if we honor Shakespeare's line breaks and look for like why, what is it about verse that helps an actor phrase and, more importantly, an audience hear. We talk about why iambic pentameter, why not iambic hexameter, why not iambic heptameter, septameter, octameter, or tetrameter, right? Which would be shorter, 4 beats. Why the 5-beat line? I left no ring with her, what means this lady, right? Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. These phrases, these 10-syllable-ish phrases are kind of nice chunks of thought that are easily digestible. And when we speak in life, we tend to phrase in certain digestible amounts so that we ensure we're being understood, right? So sometimes when we have a long thought and we run it together, maybe it takes a little bit longer for my ear to catch up. An actor can easily run away from an audience by not, allowing them to stay on. We want to kind of keep on the same rhythm with an audience. Yeah. So this time through, Marianna, see if we can honor those line breaks and find a reason. We don't want to just stop like it's William Shatner. You know what I mean? Excuse me. He's a great actor, but but find a reason why that phrase exists on its own and still connects to that next thought when we get into the middle of it.
Great. I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. She made good view of me. Indeed, so much that methought her eyes had lost her tongue, for she did speak in starts distractedly. Excellent.
What do you think?
Well, what happens there is like there's these discoveries. It's like indeed so much. How much? What happened? What happened? How do I know? That methought her eyes had lost her tongue, and even if you do the second one, methought her eyes had lost her tongue. Yeah, because she spoke in starts distractedly, right? So it's like it just takes a moment for the image to go like boom into her head.
Yeah, and then comes flying out.
Yes.
And there was so many things you were doing. Then all of a sudden, facially, what you're indicating as you're making revelation after revelation. And we always want to remember this stuff is happening in the present tense. We've got to be in the present with the audience, right? Even though she's trying to put together some past events, but she's having a present tense revelation. And to watch your face, the emotion of that play over your face in those micro beats in the middle, and then invest their energy into how you said the next line is brilliant acting. I don't know. For me, version 2 was the better version, the more powerful version, the fuller version. And it was a simple choice, right? Now that might not mean that every time. Sometimes we might say, you know what? You got to run that one together because I'm going to never get the connecting the dots. But it's really helpful for an actor to be asking these questions and a director in a process and try it both ways. That's what we call rehearsal, right? And to see which one works. And for my money anyway, I don't know what you felt when you're watching it. I hope you enjoyed that. Both of them I understood. Both of them I was able to follow. The second one kept me inside Viola's mind and heart in a way that was more thrilling to me and clearer, not only in terms of the content of the line, but in what it was doing to her emotionally, right? Yeah, because I can hear you invest that. And if I'm in the front row with you, we're at the Globe, and I'm a groundling, and I got my little chin up on the stage watching you, I'm going to get one performance. But if I'm in the more expensive seats in the back, and I'm 50 feet away, I'm going to get that based on what you did with the language, how you allowed the cost, the emotionality, and the discovery in those beats inform the next line. Yeah. Let's see if we can continue on with this and go through from She Loves Me. Sure. And I love that these revelations happen in the middle of a line too. She loves me, sure. And you keep going. And it tells us, don't stop there, right? The coming of this, I got to figure this out, because then you get to I am the man, which also happens in the middle of a line, which is really no pause, right? Right. And you've got to kind of recover in a different way. So let's just see if we can honor the line breaks where they are and try not to pause where they're not and see what happens in this.
Great.
Yeah. And let's take it up through Better Love a Dream.
Okay.
For she did speak to Better Love a Dream.
Okay. For she did speak in starts distractedly. She loves me, sure. The cunning of her passion invites me in this churlish messenger. None of my lord's ring, why he sent her none. I am the man. If it be so as 'tis, poor lady, she were better love a dream.
Yes. Great. So good, because she, the tis, you took a big deep breath there, and then the poor came out with an extra, for whatever reason, instinctually, just an extra kind of long vowel on the poor lady. It's like the big O, she would.
I want there to be an O, right?
Yeah, no, right. You put the O in the poor. You did. You put it in there, and then we get a period. And we have and we get a line break so we can stop. And then we really shift gears to the self-revelation of the next thing. So let's continue doing what we're doing here, because I think it's really working well. Honor that line break, and let's see how far we can get. Just keep going.
Skies, I see thou art a wickedness, wherein the pregnant enemy does much. How easy it is for the prop. How easy is it for the prop? Okay, I always invert those two words.
I know it's very easy to do that. Yeah.
And like looking at it in real life, I forget. Okay, so how easy is it for the proper false in women's waxen hearts to set their forms? Alas, our frailty is the cause, not we. For such as we are made of, such we be. How will this fadge? My master loves her dearly, and I, poor monster, fond as much on him, and she, mistaken, seems to dote on me. What will become of this? What will become of this? As I am man, my state, what will become of this? As I am man, my state is desperate for my master's love. As I am woman, now alas the day, what thriftless sighs shall poor Olivia breathe? O time, thou must untangle this, not I. It is too hard a knot for me to untie.
Great. That's so good, because there's so much to unpack in there, and we can't assume an audience is going to be able to follow the triangle. And by taking those line breaks, you really helped me go, oh, I get it now. You love her and she loves him and he loves somebody else. You just can't win. I got it, and I'm so happy to be with you on that. So that's wonderful. So I think for the most part that the honoring of the line break in this really helps me, one, in the audience get content, and two, allows you more points of revelation that infuse the cost of what you're going through. There's also something here at the end what I love. I mean, as I am woman, now alas the day, because you have no answer for it. Like, it's like, I love him. I can't do anything about that. And then it's almost like, that part in Hamlet where he does, after, Rogan Peasant Slave, and he's like, I'm such a loser, a loser, a loser, a loser, a loser. Ah! He yells, oh, vengeance to the skies. And then he looks up at the audience and he says, why, what an ass am I? It's that great change, like I'm just yelling like an idiot, like a moron, because I don't know what. And I love that she says, she gives a sigh. Now, alas, the day is a sigh. Yeah. And then she goes, oh, that's not going to get me anywhere. What thriftless sighs shall poor Olivia breathe? Yeah, and then a new thing, right?
Yeah. And Shakespeare gives you, is very generously gives you the map of the triangle twice.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And we need it.
Yeah.
Because the first time you haven't quite figured it out, or what the potential danger is, right?
Yeah. It's like, okay, so here's the triangle. Oh my God, this triangle is really bad. Here it is again.
Yeah. Just in case I got that wrong, which we would do all the time, right? We go, wait a minute, maybe there's a more generous way of putting that, and you go, no, it's really bad.
Yeah, maybe I can fix this. Maybe it's what's that? No, it's really, really bad. It's worse than that.
Yeah. It's an amazing speech. So, and when we just start to kind of pull it apart and ask simple questions of it, it's lovely to kind of take the time to say, what if I did this, and what if I honor that? And that gives, there's a reason why, too often I think we as actors, in our need, our want to be as understandable as possible in Shakespeare, often casualize it and turn the verse into prose, which actually I would maintain makes it harder for the audience to understand than doing what you just did, which is make your way through, honor those line breaks, ask some important questions of them, which then, going back to the idea that Shakespeare is always directing us, makes our jobs easier if we're asking the right questions, right?
And there's some bravery. It takes a little bravery to be able to be like, I'm going to make sure that thought just landed, and I'm going to live in it and see what it means and how it leads to the next thought, rather than just keep going in a naturalistic way. Like you had to be brave enough to like let something, to like set something out there and let it like hang for the audience and for myself, my character, to like think through what is the next thing from there.
Mm-hmm. And then absolutely, and we get to see a marvelous actor live in the present tense, and we watch you make turns, and we can see what's happening to you, and then we can hear what's happening to you as you're kind of processing it. You're injecting it into the words in a way that it's unmistakably, again, your tuning fork is vibrating really fast. And I'm like, thank you for letting me into your soul and your viola, and why this is alive for me in the present moment. You, as always, are, what a joy to watch you act on anything, and to even collaborate with you in a small way is a privilege. So we're at, amazingly, like I said, this was going to go amazingly fast. We're at an hour already. Here we are. And we got through those two things, though. And that's, I hope anybody, those of you out there who are watching this, I hope watch it again, especially if you're, interested in doing Shakespeare, because watching a great actor kind of break it down, and watching a rehearsal, a process happen, is great. Make sure we need to have a process. This is the kind of work we do, so that when we get to our audiences, they feel confident, right? That we know what we're doing, and we're going to be a sure hand in guiding them through these amazing stories. Marianna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, we want to thank Navigate Credit Union for their support. I want to thank John Del Sesto, who's behind the scenes, making sure everything's coming up on the screen and doing all the great graphics, et cetera. Thank you, John. And we will see you in a couple of weeks with a friend and a good friend of Marianna's as well, and a colleague, Remo Araldi, is going to be joining us. Who's a great actor. We're going to be talking about Shakespeare and clowns and all sorts of things, and we'll have a good time. So we'll see you then. Meanwhile, be safe. It's still pretty dangerous out there. A happy new year. It seems like there's been a bit of a breath of a fresh air. Let's hope that it continues to push our sails throughout 2021. We'll see you later.